right click on this, and actually there's no really duplicate option in here. However, if we hit Command, hold Command and press D, it will duplicate this file. It's a bit of a trick that you can do. What we're going to name this is terrain texture. What we're going to do is to turn this into an image texture that we're going to apply to the terrain after generating the height map. So it's going to be perfectly aligned once we're done with this. So we're going to make this into a color image that we're going to apply to each of the polygons that make up the terrain, and the height map is going to raise all of the vertices. We're going to change the color of the trail to something like very light orange, just as a base color. And we can obviously tweak this. And I also kind of want to make it less saturated here. Change this to the HSB sliders, so that's hue, saturation, brightness, and change the saturation just a bit. Now I guess that looks fine. Now we're going to, so the main slope here is not visible. However, this group of gradients, this contains the gradients here, definitely is. Oh, and we have the airbrush in here. Just drag that out. And we're going to make the group invisible. Now we can only see the fill color and the airbrush. Oh, actually, we can open the height map image, rotate the airbrush by 20 degrees. The reason why we're doing this is because, if you can see here, let me just undo this just for a bit. Because we just made a size airbrush that was smaller, scaled that up, points of the airbrush are kind of aligned with each other, and it's like a scaled thing. So there's no real like angle. It looks kind of gridded here, and it looks kind of unnatural. So that's why we are rotating this airbrush to kind of get rid of that. Command Shift Z to redo. And now we can open our chain sim terrain texture. Right click this airbrush and rotate again 20 degrees. And we're doing the same thing for this airbrush, and we're not going to move the airbrush. You need to be especially careful here not to move the airbrush, because what we're going to do to change the color of the airbrush a green color. And what this is going to do is to make each point in the texture green. And this is going to color each of the points in the terrain green, and because they're so raised, it will look like grass once we have applied the texture and aligned it with the terrain, once we've generated it using the height map. You might just want to adjust the color a bit here, decrease the saturation a bit, maybe decrease the brightness just a bit. What we're going to do is to change the fill color as well. So this is the color of the background, and we're going to change this, and this is the thing that fills this entire image. Everything else that we do is over. Then we're going to change this to a brown kind of color. And I guess we're also going to just adjust this just a bit, maybe a bit less saturated. We can make this a bit less saturated here, and maybe make it a bit more, I don't know, like that. That seems good. And maybe also make it a bit darker. Now we can save this, and now we're going to export each of these images. So we're going to, with this program, you just hold down Command and hit E to export this. I'm again going to export this into the assets folder of my chain simulation project, and into this images folder we're going to save this as the same name. However, what we're going to do is we are going to format it in TIFF for the height map. TIFF has a greater vertical kind of resolution, so it's going to create a better height map. Okay, so now we're going to open the chain sim terrain. Open the chain sim terrain texture. Again, export this, and I guess we'll just format it in TIFF as well. It's pretty basic. It's just grass, and it's just a very simple graphic here. However, it will look a lot nicer applied to a terrain that really does have a bit of noise. So now what we're going to do is to create the terrain. First, go to the hierarchy, go to the create menu, 3D object, and then select terrain. And now I guess we should actually delete all of these chain links. This was also just kind of a test. Oh, maybe not like every single one of them. We're going to just rename this to chain link and keep all of these settings. Maybe reset this instances to 1, Chain link, that's fine. Iterations, that's fine where it is right now. Now, drag this down to the project. Make sure that it's in the main assets folder in the project, which is the project folder. Drag it down in here to create a prefab out of it, which is a stored version of this object in the scene, and it's storing it right in here. And this already has the cloner script applied to it that you want applied to it when you want to do this whole kind of duplicating operation, making chains. And also, we're going to delete these. And now, we're going to rename this one to wooden post. Then, to create a prefab out of it with the box collider. Let me just collapse this standard assets folder and drag this into prefabs because it's a prefab as well. Maybe collapse all of these as well. Why do we need them open? Chain link. So this is the chain link object, and these are all the levels of detail. I guess in case we need them. I don't know. Now, because we don't want this quad anymore, we can just make it inactive. The main camera, we don't really need this. We have it set active, and we can just put this right there. So now we have a terrain, and look how huge this terrain is by default. So we are going to want to reduce the size because these chains are just like subatomic. Relative to this terrain, those chains are subatomic, and we don't want that because that's not how it was in the final image. So terrain, and scale this on the x-axis. Well, actually, scaling it doesn't really do anything. Why is that? Well, I don't really know. However, the terrain settings, in the terrain settings, you can adjust the terrain width and the terrain length, and this is what you want to change to actually scale it. So this is the same as kind of scaling it. Reduce the size of the terrain. What we're going to do now is to scale it to something like maybe 32 by 32 for a start. And just zoom in on this, maybe get out of ISO mode because I don't really want to be in that mode right now. I'm just looking at things. Isometric perspective can cause problems like maybe like clipping, like objects kind of clipping and distorting as you zoom in on them. You can see that this chain, this wooden post, is actually pretty, it looks pretty proportionate to this terrain. However, actually twice the size that I would want. So we're going to scale this to maybe 0.5 in all three directions. And the chain link size is fine as it is. And then we're going to actually scale this terrain down a bit, 24 by 24. And basically just adjust this until you think it looks fine. I actually might change this to 16 by 16. Okay, so now we have made and set our terrain. Now let's generate it, move all of its vertices based on the image that we just created. The way we're going to do that is to use a script from this Unity Answers page. So someone made a post, a question post on this site, was trying to convert the script that was in JavaScript to C#. And this is supposed to take a texture 2D, so a texture like our texture that we just made, and apply it to the terrain height map, linking to the original script that he's trying to convert. So let's open that. This is a wiki.unity3d.com page. So this is a height map from texture script. It uses a texture in your project as a height map, which is applied to the active terrain. And this way, you don't have to import raw files. So this is why we're doing it this way. Just want to mention that. We're planning to use an image that is not a raw file, essentially. Again, a TIFF file to generate the terrain from. However, the vertical resolution is going to be limited to 8-bit. Requires Unity 2.6, although it will work with Unity 2.5. So Unity 2.6 is pretty old. So that might be why this script is in JavaScript. So Unity has like deprecated JavaScript, I believe. This is the original script. What you would do if you actually are able to use JavaScript is to select all of this and copy from it. However, because it's JavaScript, we don't want to use this because, I mean, I don't think we can. So converted script. Another person did some more fiddling and finally found the cause. It was some journey, as he says. After debugging, found that it was applying some grayscale throughout the whole terrain. So obviously there was some problem with rounding. The Java is very forgiving in this, it seems. I've replaced the whole code to strict type that gave me errors about not compatible types which needed to be resolved. After that, replaced all of your integer shenanigans with floor to int methods, which led to fixing the filter mode point path, but not bilinear filtering. But then I couldn't believe my eyes. Do you know why there's this whole problem? This. I don't go deep into this, but in Java, the W2 and W1 have priority. In C#, not. If you do this, it does not work. It's still not enough. You have to do this. So I believe basically what he's doing is like taking these, like creating new variables in some kind of function and then storing, I don't know, and then basically putting the variable parameters in parentheses so that like this whole thing is like treated as one variable. I don't know. So now he gives inserts the final script in C#. This is the script that we're going to use. So first, we're going to select all of it, and then we're going to hold down Command and hit C to copy from it. Now we're going to head back into Unity. Oh, this console thing is opening. It's because I clicked on this footer here. So now, what we're going to do is to hit Create, and we're going to choose the C# script option, or anything you want. So now, we're going to open this and hope that it will open in Visual Studio quickly today. Now, we're going to select all of this. Not move part of it, select all of it. We want to make it so that we have just one line, and now we're going to hold down Command and press V to paste all of this in here, and now we should have a script that we should be able to use. Now we're going to hit the compile option, and it's going to build the project, including this script that we just added. We're going to close Visual Studio window. Okay, so once the editor loads and recognizes that we just compiled this, we should see on the menu bar at the top left of your screen, we should see a new option called Terrain. If we click on this, there's an option that says Heightmap from Texture. If we click this, we'll get a dialog, no texture selected, please select a texture. So to fix this, obviously, we're going to select the texture that we just made. Go under Images and select the Chain Simulation Heightmap TIFF image that we just then hit Terrain, Heightmap from Texture. It's not going to work, and we're going to get another error that says Unity exception, texture chain sim heightmap is not readable. The texture memory cannot be accessed from scripts. You can make the texture readable in the texture import settings. What that means is that by selecting the texture in the inspector, it will display metadata of the settings of the texture, and under this advanced dropdown, you can open it if needed, and under this, there's an option that says Read Write Enabled. This is what will make the texture readable. So if we click on this, the script can now access, and okay, so when we deselect the image, it'll bring up this window that says Unapplied Import Settings. We want to apply the settings that we just made, so we just clicked on this checkbox, actually apply that change. This script is now going to be able to read and write to this texture. It's obviously not going to write to the texture, it's going to read from it, because it's generating a terrain from the texture. Select the texture, again, go to Terrain, Heightmap from Texture. To this terrain that we just created in this scene, the active terrain, it will make changes to this terrain. And it's definitely doing something a bit odd. Okay, so now I found out essentially why it's not visible to us right now. So, give myself a bit more real estate here. If we zoom out in the scene view, we can see eventually that there is this terrain here. We need to zoom out a lot to see this. So go into the terrain and you can see it's very tall. And in fact, if we zoom in on the terrain, you can see that because the trail is flat, you can see it's the correct part of the scene. However, you can see the grass is so tall and so like spiky and stiff looking. So this terrain is basically too tall. So the reason for this is in the terrain settings, we did not set the terrain height to be something in proportion. So it would be in proportion by default, but because we set it to something way smaller than it's set to by default, the width and length, we also need to set the terrain height to something that is small. So let's just select 16 just to start with, and you can definitely see that this, it might not be tall enough. It might be a bit too short for my liking. So I'm just going to set this to something like 24, and as you can see here, it's definitely pretty tall. So this part might be a bit shorter distance between the edge and the trail than before, and this might be a bit larger, a bit longer than before, a bit taller in the image.